and start the recording. And next slide, please. Oops, now I have to push my got it button here. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about Healthy Aging Alberta and Core Alberta, as this is who is hosting today's session. And so if you're not already familiar, Core Alberta is part of a provincial initiative called Healthy Aging Alberta, and the backbone organization for that initiative is the United Way of Calgary and area. CORE stands for Collaborative Online Resources in Education, and it's a free member-based digital knowledge and learning platform connecting community-based seniors serving, or CBSS, organizations to each other and to their allied system partners, such as health and housing. And it really functions as a communications and content sharing tool, a capacity building tool, and a collaboration tool, allowing members to find and collaborate with others who have aligned mandates. And so overall, it's really contributing to the network and sector building goals and the vision of Healthy Aging Alberta. Next slide, please. So what is Healthy Aging Alberta? There's so many things we could say, so I'm going to be brief, but it's a network of community-based organizations and allies across the province who are united by, not that brief, united by the shared vision of making Alberta one of the best places in the world to grow older. It really emerged from a recognition that while Alberta's rapidly growing older adult population really has a strong desire to age in community or age in place, they're often unable to do so, partly due to a lack of reliable, accessible, and coordinated non-medical support services, such as home, social, and financial supports. And so there are literally probably hundreds, thousands of organizations in the sector offering these supports, but there's often been little integration between these services or coordination. And so that really is the purpose of Healthy Aging Alberta, is to unify and coordinate the sector more. And so I'm not going to go into a whole history because that would take us too long, but we do have regional community developers working in regions across the province, connecting within and across the province. And so if you want to learn more, connect further, get in touch with us and we'll connect you with the folks from your region. And I'm just going to say a couple more things just about CORE to kind of give you an idea of the reach, the current reach. These are from a couple of days ago. So we have almost 2,000 members, and being a member means that you're essentially a user of the site. And you've registered as a user, and again, it's free. We have a lot of content, over 4,000 pieces. I will say it's an ongoing process of making sure we are removing old content. So not all of this is up to date, but we are also loading new content in all the time. We have a lot of monthly hits for 5,000. These aren't unique visitors, but it's still a lot of activity on the site. And we have 18 groups that are connecting on key issues and collaborating in different ways. And so one of our groups is the Emergency Disaster Preparedness Group, who has organized today's session. And I'm now going to turn it over to Kim, who is a group lead. Kim B. We actually have two Kims here today. Kim B, who is a group lead for that group.
Erin. I'm excited to see everybody here today. I think, as we all know, it's been a rough year in Canada for natural disasters and climate disasters, with hundreds, maybe thousands of Canadians being displaced and livelihoods destroyed and lives lost. And we do know that disasters in Canada are increasing both in scope and in frequency. We also know that older adults have special considerations during disasters and emergencies. They might have difficulty with mobility, sense issues such as hearing or sight, or cognitive issues that make taking action in an emergency a little bit more difficult. So we use the term zero responders, and these are the people who are kind of arrive on the scene before first responders. So they're your neighbors and your friends and your family. And those relationships really matter. They matter for loneliness and isolation, and they also matter during disasters and emergencies. So I'm very pleased to introduce Heather Keam today, who will be sharing some ideas with us. She's from the Tamarack Institute. She'll be talking with us about how we, people who work with older adults, can foster and support these kind of zero responder relationships, not only during disasters and emergencies, but all the time, so that those relationships are formed and strong when we need them. And I'd also like to thank Kim Savard, who is going to help with the chat during our conversation today. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather. Oh, you're on mute, Heather.
I I had to find the mute button. You think after all this time you'd figure that out. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me here today. I am going to attempt multitasking and try to share my screen and also have a laptop with some notes and stuff. So let me share screen. There you go. Thumbs up, everyone can see. Awesome. So thank you so much for having me here. So my name is Heather Keam, and I am a mom of 3 teenage boys, a wife, and I'm a rural gal, a country gal. So for those of you who are in the like small towns in the north and stuff, woohoo to rural communities. We are awesome. And my home office is located on the Treaty 3 and is the home to Haudestohnese and Anishinaabe people, also known as Brant County, Ontario. So I'm in Ontario right now. And I'm the Associate Director for the Communities Building Belonging Practice Area here at the Tamarack Institute. And I have been in Tamarack for 8 years, but prior to that, I was in public health for 13 years. And I am very passionate about community. I do this work personally, and I also do it professionally, and I'm trying to make my rural town the best place for my children to grow up in. So today, we are going to do 3 things. We're going to think. We're going to think about your community efforts, and I'm going to ask that you be open to the possibility of change. We are going to see how we can put people, the human beings in our community, at the center of our programs and our activities. And we are going to reflect on what can we alter, what can we stop, and what can we start doing to be more community connectors. What we have learned over the past 2 years, I call us we're in a COVID hangover right now because we're not quite sure what we're doing and how to go forward. But we really do know the importance of community, and we know the importance of the people who live in our community, and we have to center them in our work going forward. I've been working with John McKnight for the past 2 years about community connectors. And so I'm really excited about this because this group here, you all, are the first ones to experience and learn about some of the new stuff that John and I have been working with over the past 2 years. So I would love feedback about this, and I'm excited to share our learning. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that you're in an emergency. Your first responder is not going to be a first responder, it's going to be your neighbor. And so the work that you're doing is really important, but it needs to happen before the emergency so that we can be prepared. And so I know that you all have been doing this work and you're really like trying to center emergency preparedness. And so kudos to you all. And I'm hoping that you'll find some thoughts and new processes and ways to reflect to deepen your work. The purpose of this workshop is that there's no cookie cutter. So when you've seen one community, you've only seen one community. And so I'm going to give you some inspiration, but unfortunately, you're going to have the hard part is you're going to actually have to translate that into your community. And how could this be done? I'm not going to tell you how. I'm going to tell you some ideas and hopefully inspire you. And that this workshop is about discovering, connecting, and mobilizing. And so hopefully you'll get some tips and tools and ideas to be able to do that. And so when I talk about community, I'm using community in a very broad sense because I don't know your community. And so you have to be able to translate that. And so just wanted to let you know that when I say community, it's either your neighborhood or it's your city or your region or your town. It's however you translate that. So to start off, I like to kind of use an opportunity to reflect. There are some trends that are happening in our community, and we need to think about these as we go forward. So our changes in family and social structures. Families are smaller, they are more spread out, and divorce rates and single parent rates are causing weaker connections in our communities. The work and time pressures, we have a shift in our workforce. We have more two-income families. We have more contract work. We have more part-time and multiple part-time jobs, which leads to less stability in our lives. It does cost more to be socially connected, to get out and do things in our communities. It's less accessible, less affordable, membership costs, travel costs, food costs. We have to take that into consideration. People are spending more times in their cars. So the way we're building our communities, the urban sprawl, the fact that we're regionalizing. So thinking of the small towns where you used to have the services in your town, we now have to drive to another town. So we're spending more time in our cars. And then in terms of volunteering and time to be able to do this work in my off hours, the sweet spot to do this is 6:30 to 8. That doesn't leave a lot of time in a person's life to be able to do this work and volunteer. Now, technology, I would actually say before COVID that technology was the enemy of connection and deep connections, but I have changed that perspective now, because technology actually helped us to stay connected when we were going through COVID. But it actually just it's more about it's not about depth of relationship. So technology is good at connecting us, but it's not good at building the relationships. And so we have to think about the technology. Our kids, our younger kids, are on technology 24/7. And we have to think about that as we do our programming and going forward. And then you look at the aging population, the comfortability with technology, and how can we use that. The other thing with technology is that it's changed the way volunteering happens. A lot of people would rather do a Zoom meeting instead of going to a board meeting in person. And it allows us to be in our pajamas and have a glass of wine while we are doing our volunteer work. So there are some benefits to our technology. Participation in community. We are at an all-time low in people participating in community. And I believe it's the fact that we've lost that sense of meaning and purpose in our communities. We don't know how to get involved in our communities, but also, to step up to be a counselor or a mayor, it's not a pretty job anymore. You have to have a really tough skin. Where before it was a community effort. And so volunteerism's gone down. The rates of people putting their hats in for council has gone down. And so we have to really think about that and think about our ways of going forward, and how do we make volunteering fun, affordable, and easy to do. I'm not going to go into the COVID, but COVID has really changed our communities and how we go forward. And so I just say that you have to reflect on, what did you miss before COVID? What changed during COVID that you thought, wow, we can't lose this? And then how do we go forward? A lot of organizations, groups, and people, I call it snapback. They're snapping back to what the way we were before COVID. And how do we prevent the snapback, and how do we go forward? This one here is near and dear to my heart: change in rural culture. So rural communities, in the community development world, rural communities were seen as the gold standard of how communities should be. It has changed a lot. Rural communities are sleeper towns. There's more people coming and going. The days of you being born in a town, growing up in a town, and dying in a town have changed. People move and they come and they go. We're still living in the olden days. So I know my town, we still want to live, and our principles are based on the old ways, and we have changed so much. And so we don't know how to move forward in a new vision or a new goal for our rural communities. And so that is actually hindering our community and our growth. And then the last one is loneliness and disconnection. And this spring, the U.S. Surgeon General put out a report. And if you haven't read it yet, it is really good. And it's talking about loneliness and disconnection is the new public health issue. And it's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So for the public health folks on the call, I saw there was some FCSS folks on the call. Loneliness and disconnection is the #1 public health issue. And it also, there's some research from the Angus Reid, and what I'm going to do is I will send Kim B some of the links to these reports for you, because they're really worth a read. So the Angus Reid report found that 50% of people don't know their neighbors. And if you don't know your neighbors, how are you going to be prepared? And so we really need to think about all of the trends in our community and how are we going to go forward. And I want to just take this time, if you can open up your chat box, to reflect. Are you seeing any other changes in your communities? Is there anything else that you see in terms of trends, or you see, and it doesn't have to be negative trends, maybe some positive trends that you can share with the group? Because these are just the ones that I'm seeing. And a lot of these trends that I'm seeing came from the Ontario Chief Medical Officer of Health. All chief medical officers of health of every province has to do reports. So there's another great resource for you, is to check what your chief medical officer has put out. The Canadian Chief Medical Officer of Health just did a report on resilient communities, which you might want to actually, and it's talking about emergency preparedness and crisis, and that was just released this month. So I will make sure you get that link for that. So Kim S., is there anything in the chat box?
I just came off mute, and somebody has said, I live in a tiny town and there's been a marked increase in crime. Bashing of council and town employees on Facebook platforms, social media, increased crime again. Can help bond neighbors, but also deter people from getting to know their neighbors.
Yeah, crime actually is another one. And I think I just didn't have enough, I need to look into some more research in terms of what does that mean in communities. And I'm thinking it's meaning that people aren't willing to get involved and get out and get to know your neighbors. So when you're looking at connection, safety and connection. So how do we do our connection in a safe way? Because if you just knock on a random door, most people don't actually answer doors anymore. They usually run away, right? And so we have to, how do we do the connection in a safe way? So my philosophy this year is old ways won't open new doors. And that's why I start off with the trends and getting you to think of the trends in your community, is because we have to think about how are we going to go forward in a new way? Because if the old way was working, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this is one of your challenges that I'm going to ask of you, is to think about what are some of your new doors and the new ways that you're going to go forward. And I'm going to give you some ideas and thoughts on this. I love this. So, and I was just talking to the two Kims before we started, is that the work that the ABCD Institute is doing in the US, and it really centers the people in our community. And I think it centers people in the community, but also kind of implies that organizations and institutions aren't needed. And I disagree with that. What I think is happening is that organizations and institutions really do mean well, but we're just showing up in community the wrong way. And so I use the analogy of a 3-lane highway, because if you look at a highway, the 3 lanes have a purpose. You have a slow lane, you have a passing lane, and you have a fast lane. And what has happened over time is that organizations have taken over the whole highway and is acting kind of like a pace car, where we are doing the activities in the community and all the people are behind us. The new way, or a new mind shift, is how do we figure out what our role is in our communities? And so that there is a lane for community, there's a lane for organizations and institutions, and there's a lane for municipalities. And when we figure out our roles and understand our responsibilities on that highway, we're going to flow more, and we're all going to end up going to the same destination, but just doing it in the ways that we are meant to do it. And then I use the lane, the highway, because we need to work together. But how do we respectively work together? Which means you put your indicator on, you go into the other lane. Well, first of all, you ask and you find out, how can we work together? You do what you need to do. But the most important thing is go back into your lane. So I'm not sure, because I can't see a lot of you on here, but I just wonder, does this resonate with you? Do you see how sometimes we can actually be the whole highway? And it's not done intentionally, but it's just because we have mandates and we have work to do. And sometimes it's easier for us just to do it because we know the change is going to happen. But I challenge you to think about how can you work on a highway in your communities where you all have roles and responsibilities. Here's another way of looking at that. And I really do like this because it helps you to reflect on your work. So this comes from Cormac Russell, who I say is the up-and-coming John McKnight in terms of asset-based community development. He's from Ireland. And what I really like about this, because it helps you to stop and reflect on where your work sits. And there's no right or wrong way. When it does become a hinder is when it's all in one way. And so they're providing to community. So people are seen as recipients. And there are times where this is appropriate. For public health folks, you don't want neighbors vaccinating each other. Right? So there are times where things have to be done to the community because the experts need to do it. Provided for the community, so people are seen as information sources, and I know that in public health, I'm going to say most of my stuff sat in the fore, where we went into the community and we said, what do you need, how do you need, and all that kind of stuff. But then I went back to my desk and I did the work. And so an example of that would be the community identifies food insecurity as one of their top issues. So then I go back to my desk, good food boxes. So I plan the good food boxes. I select the neighborhoods this needs to go in based on data. I figure out how often it should go out, and I deliver the boxes. So that is provided for the community. Provided with the community is where this is done for us, with us. So an example would be the good food boxes. Is given to priority neighborhoods, but those neighborhoods decide when it be delivered, where, and what's in it. So they're more advisors. And then the last one, and this is the ultimate, this is where community development should sit, and people are in control. They're provided by the community. So instead of the food boxes, because I chose that based on data or best practice, the community builds a community garden, and they grow their own food, and they choose where it is and who to share it with. So you can kind of see the difference in programming. Where the issue comes in is when we stay at top. And all of our programs and activities are mostly on the top. And the programs with the with and the by, that's where assets create sustainability. That's where community development should be mostly sitting. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying when you're reflecting on your work, that it should be a mix of the quadrants. And so I'm going to do a poll. Kim, do we have the poll ready? So I'd like you to reflect on a program or your activity. And where does it mostly sit? So I love this question. So when I do this, it's very interesting because it's almost similar no matter where I go. And the reason why I do this is not to show right or wrong, because getting you to reflect and to see where your programming or your activity sits gets you to open up your mind for the next part, which is the mind shifts and some of the ways that we can be moving down to the to more towards the bottom. And the not sure, it is hard because you have to reflect. And so thank you for those who said not sure, because but I ask that you reflect on this when you leave, and then see where you're sitting, and then question, is this appropriate? So the program and activity that you chose, is it appropriate to be at the top? If you go, no, it's not, then there's some ways that you can do it so that it moves down to the bottom. So thank you so much, everybody, for participating in the poll. So I'm going to ask you to go to your chat box because I love this question. What is the function of your neighborhood? So I'm going to ask you to put your personal hat on and think about the neighborhood you live in and what is the function. And if you can kind of keep it to 1 or 2 words or a very short sentence, because Kim's going to read these out. What is the function of your neighborhood?
Heather, what is the or a function?
The or a function of your neighborhood. So my neighborhood, I would say my function of my neighborhood is to raise my children.
Okay, and I'm just going to start reading them out. So shared space, place to live, was supposed to be affordable housing, another place to live, residential family space, sense of community, supporting community, safe place to live again, place to raise family. Whoa. We've got this coming in fast and furious now. Place to relax and enjoy, services, community network of shared resources. Place to call home, healthy living, peaceful place to be, connections and relationships.
Yeah.
Safe place to raise a family.
I love asking this question because this is actually going to get us to understanding the roles and responsibilities of community. This is a piece that's hot off the press. John McKnight and Cormac Russell wrote an article about the 7 functions of community. And based on the research of over 3,000 stories, they came up with 7 functions. And in the work that I've been doing with John McKnight over 2 years, we added 2 more. And it's the celebrating together and the inclusiveness. And so I'm pretty sure if we looked at the chat box of all of your responses, they would fit in to one of these 9 functions of community. So the enabling health in, how long we live and how often we are sick is really determined by our personal behaviors, our social relationships, the environment, our income, the security piece, which we actually talked about in terms of crime and safety. The data says the more people that you know in your community by name, the safer your community is. Because you know who should be there, you know their cars, you know the people. And so you are actually, and that's that whole neighborhood watch, and you actually keep yourself and your neighborhood safe. Stewarding ecology, it's around the environment, and that we can, as a neighborhood, really help with our climate crisis. And the more people you know and know where they work, you can carpool, you could be sharing resources within your neighbors, keeping the our neighborhoods free of garbage. So there's a lots around ecology that we can do as a neighborhood. Shaping local economies. This is the whole bartering, social capital. like a lot of the stuff that the small businesses start off in our garages. And we support each other in our crafts, and we barter and we share. Food production, growing community gardens, sharing our vegetables. I know a lot of us grow way too many tomatoes, and we're trying to, share them and give them to our neighbors. Raising our children. We all know the saying, it takes a village to raise our children. The co-creating care, this is really important. This is the care that you can't buy. This is the care that has naturally happening in our community. And I heard one story where a lady, her dad went into the hospital, he had a heart attack, and she had to leave. And her community walked her children to school, baked muffins so that the children had a snack when they came home, put meals together so that the dad didn't have to cook. That's the caring that happens in our community. And then the two that we added was a celebrating together. Neighborhoods celebrate. They celebrate births, they celebrate deaths, they celebrate graduations. And so as a neighborhood, we celebrate together. And then the inclusiveness is our neighborhoods celebrate our differences. And we welcome differences, and we bring them into the activities that we do, the foods, and we learn about each other's culture. So the reason why I'm sharing this and talk to you about this is because our neighborhoods, our communities do have a function. And so as we look at new ways, how can we as volunteers, as organizations, shift what we do to the community to supporting community to do for themselves? Because now we know the functions of community.
Heather, we've got a question in the chat. So are neighborhood and community used interchangeably? Neighborhood seems more like physical space, and community seems more like relationship space.
Thank you for that question. I have a habit of switching back and forth. So I'm using neighborhoods and community kind of as the same word, because I don't know where you live. Right? So I don't know where your programs happen. I don't know the context of your work. And so I'm using neighborhood and community probably in the same way. Like scale is really important. So I'm thinking more of like a neighborhood, a few blocks radius. But your neighborhood or your community might be your town, the whole town. I don't know. So I'm sorry. I kind of interchangeably use those. So, but again, if you want to bring this 9 functions to your local work, you can change it to 9 functions of neighborhoods, 9 functions of community, the 9 functions of our city. These are just things that people, human beings, are able to do. So I hope that makes sense. Sorry, I'll be more mindful. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I just want to center as we go forward, because we're going to now get into the connection part. There are resources to connect in your community. And it's really important that we start off with the people, the residents, the human beings in our communities. Then we go to the associations, and then the institutions and local places, exchange and culture. So it's really important, because you're starting with the inside, which is the human, and then you're going outwards. And that's how we're going to also be doing our connecting piece. These are 6 assets that John McKnight talks about in asset-based community development. And I do apologize, because I'm not going into what is asset-based community development or ABCD. I will provide a resource that will go over that, because I don't want to focus on the theory part. I really want to focus on the practical and the connecting part. So the first asset is the human beings in our community and what they have to offer in our community. Everybody has a gift, an asset to contribute to community. The associations are the local clubs, the volunteers, the volunteer groups in our communities, such as Rotary, Lions, Optimist, Scouts, those ones. And how you can define them is that I'm going to say 98% is strictly volunteers. And I say 98% because churches are actually an association, but they usually do pay the minister or they do pay for an admin staff. But we put them into the association. And then you have your local institutions. I call it, in Canada, we don't really use institutions, we use organizations. And your government would be more institutions, and education departments and all that would be more institutions. So local institutions and organizations. And then we have our local places. So these are our parks, I call them bumping places. That would be the post office box or the post office, where people bump into. Used to be banks we would bump into, but these are places where people can gather and meet each other. And then there's the exchange, and that's the bartering and how we exchange with each other. And then our stories and culture. And this is really important because stories and culture help us to know where we've been and gives us ideas of where we need to go. So when we're talking about connection in our community, we're not only connecting people, but we are going to connect associations to institutions and organizations. We're going to connect places and people to our places. We're going to connect exchanges, people to barter with each other. So there's so many ways of connecting in our community. And I just wanted to plant the seed about that. So as we start talking about connection, you can then think about, oh, we got more in our community that we can connect than just individuals. But for the next part, we are going to just focus on individuals so that we can talk about connection.
Heather, we've got one more question here.
Yeah.
Any research on the preconditions or factors that enable these resources to be realized or manifested?
On the trust in relationships is a precondition. And so as you're going about learning and finding the gifts and the assets in your community and to be able to connect them, I say it moves at the speed of trust and relationships. So you need to be in the community and have that trust and relationship before you go out and start doing the connection piece. I think that's the strongest precondition. And also, the other precondition is not going into this as data, going into this as discovery, and going into this is owned and moved by the community.
Thanks, Heather. And we've got one more here. As a community connector, it's been quite challenging to recruit volunteer for community events that we plan. Do you have any tips on how to motivate community folks to volunteer in the community? You might be addressing this coming up.
No, but I just did a presentation in the summertime for the 4-H groups and the Agricultural Society in Ontario. And because volunteerism is really gone down. And so the thing is with volunteering, and I'm seeing this, I'm part of our Optimist group, and our Optimist group is really suffering with keeping volunteers as part of the group. And there are several things I think as to why this is happening. One is we don't know the volunteers. They're just bums in the seat, or they're just people to hand out things. So we need to get to know the volunteers and what are their gifts, what are their assets. Passions are so important. If you can find out that Heather is passionate about children and youth, when you do an event about children and youth, you know that I'm going to totally be there and I'm your volunteer. So it's really getting to know the volunteers and that they're just more than warm bodies. And I think we've kind of gone away from that in our volunteer work. The other thing is it's really hard to volunteer with something that I pulled in at the very end and I don't contribute to. And so it's rethinking volunteering. The last thing, and you know what, I can share my slides about volunteering and using this, like using asset-based community development to shift your volunteering. The word volunteering, I think, needs to change. I think calling, like, if someone said, Heather, you're a change maker, I would be more willing to contribute to something because I'm a change maker. I'm going to make some change in my community. I think this the word volunteering. I think we have to retire that and find a new way. The other thing is, I said I wasn't going to tell you one more, but one more is, why have a meeting when you can have a party? I hate board meetings around a table, blah, blah, blah. But if we bring in food and we bring in some fun and we make them and we make the time that we have together a little bit more enjoyable, I'm going to come out more. And I have some more tips. And so I will be happy to share that, share it with you all. I don't have all the answers, but I'm just using it. I put an asset-based lens on it. And I really feel like we have to center the people in our organizations who volunteer more. And it does take a lot of time. The last part is when I don't show up as a volunteer, nobody cares. So if somebody called me up and said, Heather, you haven't been to the last 2 board meetings of the Optimist Club, we're just, you know what, we missed you. And we just want to know what can we do to, to help. Huge in bringing me back. So that sense of belonging and volunteering needs to come together. So anyways, I kind of digress, but thank you for that question, because I'm really, as you can see, passionate about the volunteering and how can we take volunteering to, actually the old ways, shutting the old ways of volunteering and opening new doors for volunteering. And I think the first thing is changing the name. Let's call us change makers or some other like fun name. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question. So I'm going to take us connecting community. We start off with the individuals because it's really important to get to know the human beings in your community. And everybody has a gift and an asset, but unless you're asked, Heather, what is your gift? I'm not going to tell you. So that connector, the being a connector, your number one role is to ask questions, is to ask and find out what these gifts and these assets are. And you're probably saying, okay, well, how do you do that? Well, here are some very simple, basic questions. So, Heather, what's your most significant gift? These are gifts you were born with. These are gifts that comes naturally to you. And mine is, I'm a people person. I love people. I can go into any room and I can talk to anybody. That is a gift that is very hard to learn. You can, but it comes naturally to me. What are your most significant skills that you have learned? I learned from our local church lady how to crochet. I can crochet Afghans. Don't ask me to crochet a sweater or anything like that. Afghans. And so you're finding what are these things that significant gifts you have learned. Most important question is, what do you care about that will make you act or promote or do something? Because like I said, passions make people move. And so if you're wanting to do projects, if you're wanting around emergency preparedness, find out those people who are passionate about this. And those are the ones that you'll tap on the shoulder when needed. And there's a lot of different passions in the community. And again, unless I'm asked, I'm not going to share. Knowledge. This is something as you going about. And so one of the things that we talked about is, how to get people to volunteer in our programs or in our activities. When I was in public health, I'm going to say my number one frustration was I would plan things and plan events and did so much to promote it and everything, and 20 people showed. And I just like, why is this happening? And it's because I did not really take the time to know what people wanted in the community. And so I did a stress workshop, but you know what? Stress wasn't the number one thing that they wanted to know about. What they really wanted to know about was it was cooking on a budget. right? So what do people know well enough that they can share and teach in our neighborhood? But what do people want to learn? And you can see a natural connection here, because if you have somebody who knows is a chef and knows how to cook, and you have people who want to learn how to cook, cooking for one, you can match these up and they would do the programming and you support by providing the food in the space. And then another question is, what groups or associations do you belong to? Because a lot of the groups and associations aren't listed anywhere. You have the book clubs. You're not going to find them by Googling them. And so when I go out into my community and I meet somebody, it's almost like I have these questions on a little card in my back pocket. And when I meet somebody, I'm like, oh, what brings you here? If you could teach anything, what would it be? Like, I just kind of constantly asking these questions, and I'm filing it away, and getting their name and hey, if we ever needed a cooking demonstration, would you be willing to do it? And so the invitation is there, and you're finding this out. And this is the asset mapping piece of it. And a lot of people do asset mapping, and they create these pretty maps and these lines and all of this, or a spreadsheet of the names of people, and then they stop. And that's where we actually hurt the trust and the relationships in our community, because we took from the community and we did nothing with it. And so it is really, really important to use this information. If you're going to ask these questions, you need to be a connector, and you need to be able to connect the work.
Heather, we just have another question here.
Yeah.
Bringing faith-based groups, community groups together can be a bit challenging considering their ideological and cultural differences. They do have gifts and skills to offer, but are not willing to share with other groups, and vice versa. How to manage this?
That's actually very interesting. And a lot of churches are thinking about this, and how can they come together? It doesn't happen overnight. And this is where the different faith groups have to build trust and relationships with each other in the community. And it's also being aware. So our local church does meat pies. They also host a fall free barbecue. That's our one church. Our other church, we have a lot of offshore workers that come here. They support them, and so it's getting to know the different types of programs within the church, and then bringing them together and saying, you know what, you cook meat pies. We have offshore workers that are really struggling with food security. Would you donate some pies here? And help. And so that's that connection piece to it, but it has to build trust and relationships. So I know in our community, it did take a while. We have 3 different denominations in our community. It took a while for them to come together and start doing, they don't actually come together in one space, but they provide different things to different organizations. So you as an organization could be that connector and pull them in, and slowly they'll start building trust and relationships with each other, because there's a little bit of turf, right? As churches are dwindling, the parishioners are dwindling. So there's a little bit of a turf here, because they don't want somebody else to go leave their denomination to go somewhere else, right? And so you have to understand that. And that also happens within associations. I know, again, in our community, the Lions and the Optimists don't like to do things together because volunteers are short and they don't want to lose volunteers, right? And so it really does come down to building the trust and relationships, and you all on this call can be that connector to start bridging that. Very good question. Thank you for that. So here's an example of a social housing neighborhood that we worked with. What you're seeing here is only a snippet. They got 2.5 pages of stuff that they found in this one complex. And they asked questions about what will you be willing to share? What do you want to contribute to? I'm just trying to move this here. What are you passionate about? What could you teach? And what do you want to learn? And they did this because the two community developers that were in this neighborhood was doing exactly what I just said. They planned events and nobody showed. And so they got names. So when there's a 5 besides music, they have 5 names of people who are passionate about music. So they have this spreadsheet that they filled in. And they use this as a means of planning and going forward. So when you ask your questions, this is what you're going to come up with. And then what you need to do is this. You're looking at that list and what can be brought together. So how can you take the planners and the organizers and the connectors and the climate, passionate about climate and all that, and how can you form new groups? How can you connect them to existing groups? So that's one way of connecting and taking that list. This is hot off the press. This is something that John and I have come up with, 5 ways of connecting assets. And so one is identifying connectors. So I just told you that I'm a people person. I love people and I can go into a room and I can talk to anybody. I would be identified as a connector. And so you want in your community, you want to find those connectors because they're the ones that you would work with to then go out and ask these questions. I in the past have called them community champions. So these are the people that are liked and known in your community. And you then connect with these connectors. You talk about the work and would they go out and talk with their neighbors? So that's one way of connecting. Another one is one-on-one. So you found out that Heather likes to crochet. You found that another person who just moved into the community who wants to learn how to crochet. So you would connect Heather to that person. We would probably meet for coffee, and then I would then probably build a relationship. And next thing you know, we've started a crocheting club. Matching one person to a group. And so there's already a crocheting group. And you found that out. And you met me. I'm new to the community. You would say, Heather, you know what? There's a crocheting group. Would you like me to connect you to that crocheting group? Another one is identifying people to do events and activities. And so so that you would say you found somebody who is passionate about crafting and they want to be able to teach beading. And so you talk with them, you found some people who want to learn beading, you then organize a room and you buy the beads and then they lead an event or an activity. And then the 5th one is actually one that is really interesting. Oh, sorry, actually, identify new people to do events and activities. This one here, the imagine a new event or activity. This one here is about somebody who likes to bake cookies. And you find somebody who's a business person, who's looking to, really work on their business ideas. You connect the 2 of them up and they start a cookie business. And you have somebody who's willing to do the business part of it. You have somebody really to do the cooking part of it. You find a church that is, wanting to do something with their kitchen. And so you actually bring them all together and they start a new event or an activity. Number 4 is also matching people up to events or activities that are already happening. I forgot to mention that. So most communities already have events that happen every year. And so you would match them up. And say, oh, you crochet. Did you know that there is a craft fair happening? And did you want to connect with them? So these are the 5 ways. So taking that same list, this is what the community developers did, is they looked here and said, okay, there's somebody passionate about a craft show. I wonder if they would lead and be a chairperson to do a craft show. We have some people, artists and crafts and drawing, that would like to share their gifts. So I wonder if they would want to come and do something, put up a table, etc. And we have some people who are willing to teach this stuff. So we have some little workshops that can happen during the craft show. And then we have some 3 people who want to do painting. So maybe that's the workshop is painting. So it's not, it's really about discovering and being curious and then connecting. And you know, as somebody who's an organization, I haven't actually done any hard work, right? I haven't done a lot of hard work. I've been connecting, I've been going out, I've been learning about people. And then my role in this is to connect them and support them in doing this. My role isn't to do it. And I'm going to tell you, as somebody who has organized many, many, many events, this is a way easier and better use of my time as a health promoter than it was to plan an event. So pretty much this is what we've been talking about and doing. This is all in one page. So you find the individuals and you learn about them, and then you connect them. You connect them to, you connect them all to they form a new thing. You connect them to existing things. You connect them to form a new business. The reason why I'm showing this slide is I really like these 3 questions. And these 3 questions can be altered. Right now, it just talks about, you know, as neighbors, what can we achieve by using our own assets? You can change this by, you know, what could they do with their own assets? Maybe it's not neighbors, maybe it's what could churches do with their own assets. You can replace that, whatever, but it's really important. The important part of this first question is, what can they do with their own assets? And then the next question is, what can they do with maybe some outside of help? So that would be like, you know, they can do a craft show, but they don't have tables. They don't have pylons. They don't have this. That's where you, as an organization, can connect your assets. And then the last question is, what can't they do that must be done by others? And so let's say insurance. It's just like volunteers, they don't have insurance, but your organization has insurance. Or they don't know how to shut down the road or do the permit or whatever it is. It's really important that you as a community person, an organization, institution, to ask these questions in order, because this is how you're going to find your 3-lane highway. And these questions are very powerful.
Just another question here. Is it possible to do this sustainably as an agency? Seems more of a fit for neighbors working with neighbors.
You know what? It actually, so that's a really great question, because I feel that by figuring out the 3-lane highway and figuring out what neighbors can do themselves, allows you to see where you are duplicating stuff that community can do for themselves. Shift, say, okay, you know what? They can do, you know, A, B, and C all by themselves. We've been doing it. Why don't we shift and support them to do it for themselves? But you know what's missing is F and G. Maybe we can shift our focus as an organization to doing F and G. And that's where the sustainability piece comes in, because organizations, especially post-COVID, are strapped, and we're trying to do so much, and we want to do so much, and that's because we just love our communities and we want to do so much. But this allows us to say, you know what? I think we are doing stuff that the community can do for themselves. Why don't we free up our time and shift our work to doing things that they need help with or they can't do? That's where the sustainability for organizations are going to come in, because you'll be able to shift. And then when you're applying for grants or looking at funding or going to decision makers, you can actually, the work that the community is doing and that you're supporting, you can still report on the impacts. And how, like, my number one question is anyone better off by the work that we're doing? Well, by you supporting and being in touch with what's going on at the neighborhood level, you can still report that. You can report the impacts of this work that's happening. Look, they've got 17 community gardens going and they're doing it on their own. All we're doing is providing the dirt. You're still connected. So I think this is going to actually help with organization sustainability and opening new doors. This is an opportunity for you to open up new doors and think and change the way that you are showing up in community, and actually probably being stronger and building more trust in relationships. I'm just looking at the time here because I do have some, I would like you to go out in a breakout and meet each other. So connector skills. So you are all connectors, but you have to be gift-centered. You have to be thinking like this all the time. Every time you're meeting somebody, being curious and finding out the gifts of the people in your community. You do have to be well connected. So you have to step outside your comfort zone. And I'm not going to lie, the first time I tried to do this in my community, and I chickened out. I chickened out from going on and knocking on people's doors. I'm a people person, but I did chicken out and do that. And it was because I was trying to do it by myself. I brought my kids with me, and people will open doors for kids. They actually see you a little bit more of a safe person when you have kids with you than a stranger. And I also went with people that were connected in that neighborhood, and who knew that neighborhood. So you have to be well connected, and you have to be trusted. So you have to show up in community and be there, and not be there to give to the community, not just from taking from the community with surveys and programs and activities. That believe that community is welcoming, and that communities do want this. Communities want connection. They want to know their neighbors. They just don't know how. And also do this professionally and personally. So that's why I did the whole I always chicken knocking on doors, because professionally I was telling people to do this. And I was like, Heather, you got to feel what this is. There's emotions that come with this, right? And then really be curious, be a detective, be curious, ask questions, and also, connect unusual. Who knows, it might work.
And
so
Heather,
I have one.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just before we do move to groups, there's one more question here.
Yeah.
As you mentioned about sharing food, a major concern among certain communities is the purity of food as per their cultural norms. Certain community groups consider others as impure. How to gain their trust?
And you know what? That comes down with relationships and conversation. And understanding the cultural nuances to food. And so one of the ways to do that is potluck, but doing it with one. In our community, we did it with one culture, so we got to learn about that culture. And the types of food, and we're able to ask questions, right? Like, what does halal mean? And where do you get it? And being able to learn and share, that's the way to build the trust and the relationships. And in communities, like, this is where the trust also comes in, and getting people to know each other so that it's safe to ask these questions, and being able to learn. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. There's also, in terms of public health, making sure it's prepared right and at the right temperature. So there are some things and nuances when you're talking about food. Yeah. So my last slide really is kind of summing this all up. And I really do think, in terms of our new way going forward, that connection is going to be the way that we open up new doors. We need to understand that the neighbors, the people in our community, the people in our organizations, the people in our churches, they all have unique work to do. And it's finding out what that unique work is. And that this work does fulfill the 9 functions within the community. That there are tools to do the work. And there are individuals and associations that can help do that. And that the work gets done by connecting assets. And, you know, I use the analogy here, as you can see, they're building a house. A lot of people think that the most important thing to build the house is the tools and the materials. I say the most important thing is in a house is connecting, because you got to connect wires, you got to connect pipes, you got to connect the wood, you got to connect the bricks. If you don't do those connections and you do them right, your house is going to fall apart. So I'm going to pause there. I'll go back. I'm going to pause there. Is there any questions? Because I think we have some time to go into a breakout. But before we do, any questions? No? Okay. I'm going to set you up for a breakout, because the most important thing is not me and what I say. The most important thing is you all and your thinking and your next steps. So you're going to go into groups of 4. And, you know, this is the time for you to think about what you just learned. And what is one thing you can do to be a connector, whether to start being a connector or to better your connection? And what are you still grappling with? What are some of those challenges that you foresee happening? Because that's really a learning opportunity. We call these breakouts, I call them learning labs. So this is your lab. This is for you I've given you the clay. This is for you to in your learning labs to mold it and talk about it and see if this is going to work. How is it going to work in the types of shapes? We will broadcast the question to your breakout when you get into the breakout, so that you remember that, because I'm going to stop sharing.
Heather, I've got the breakout room set up if you're ready. And just to everybody, please come back after, because we just have a couple more things to share with you before you go.
Yeah.
Should we start now?
All right. Yeah, have fun. I think.
What would you like me to broadcast?
Actually, I have it up, so I'll do that. Do you want to pause the recording? Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. So I'm all about connection. So I always like to say a spot and send you into breakouts so you can meet somebody new and learn. So does anyone want to share what you talked about? What you're going to go back and try, and actually, a really important one is, what are you still grappling with? And I was just talking about how important that is. So if you either want to unmute yourself and talk about what you talked about, or in the chat box, because we can learn what you're still grappling with, and I can provide some tools and resources, or maybe a further chat about it. Is there anyone who wants to unmute? Susan?
Yeah, I was just speaking on behalf of somebody else in my group, and I'm sorry if you were going to jump in anyways, but when you said grappling with, it's about the getting volunteers engaged to begin with, and then having to deal with the process, the screening process, and losing them through that process. I don't know if you have anything to suggest on how to bridge that gap there.
That's exactly what we just were talking about while you were all in your breakout groups, because I call myself a volunteer addict, and I have a lot of pet peeves about volunteering, and how we really need to rethink about the way we go about screening our volunteers. And I think the screenings of our volunteers need to, and the questions that I just shared about what's your skill, your gift, your asset, that can be your screening. And getting to know, I call it gives and gets. So what can I give as a volunteer, but what do I need to get as a volunteer? And the gives and the gets, you understand. So I need to get learning opportunities. I really want to learn Excel, right? So when you learn about your volunteers, you can also bring them together and maybe provide an Excel class. So it's this give and gets, right? And so it's really centering volunteers in a different way, like relationships. Volunteers are more transactional. How do we create relationships with our organization and our programs? And the other part I was saying, like why have a meeting when you can have a party? I like drive-through meetings. I've got kids, right? I don't want the social blah, blah, blah. I just want in and I want out and what I need to do. And so the people who are running the meetings have to be very strong and to be able to facilitate. And then, just, yeah, I will include that PowerPoint about changing our volunteers and the way we think about volunteers. I think you'll find some really good ideas and suggestions in the slides there to help, but it is something that we have to invest in. And it's the other, I know what we were talking about is the cookie cutter. So we send out, hey, we have an event. We need volunteers. Well, you know what? I'm like, oh, well, I'm sure they're going to get lots of volunteers. I'm not going to help. Or we have this event. We are looking for people who love greeting. We like people who, we need people who have Excel expertise. We need people who are arts, who are graphic designers. We need people. And so being very specific on the types of things you need, I'm more willing to step up versus this blanket cookie cutter. We just need volunteers, right? So again, it's adding a little bit of depth to the volunteers, but I will definitely include that PowerPoint. I think you'll find some stuff in there. Thank you for that question. Is there anything in the chat box?
Looks like someone shared a resource, which I can't seem to get into. It's called Kind Neighbor. What else is in here? Yeah, just a comment around the screening process being difficult. Yeah, that piece.
And the vulnerable piece, and that's why you as a connector is that in between. And so you could be that bridge and find out, is Heather okay to meet up with somebody, and bridging. It's not just like putting me in a place where I'm not going to be comfortable. So it does take time. And to be able to do that, it's not that it can't be done. It takes a little bit longer. And trust and relationship is really important. And then, what are they comfortable with sharing, right? Like, I don't want my emails shared out with everybody. So understanding that and working, don't use it as a barrier to not to. This is where I'm be imaginative, and how can we build connections with vulnerable population? So I think I'm always over. I apologize. I never finish on time, but I think Kim has some wrap up slides.
I do. Thank you so much, Heather. But my key takeaway today is, why have a meeting when you can have a party? That's going to be my that's my go-to. I hope that everyone really enjoyed the presentation. I'd like to encourage everybody to join our group on CORE. We're obviously focused on disaster and emergency preparedness. We're not super active, so we won't put a lot of onus on you to do anything, but join us, and then you'll find out about things that we're organizing, and you can help us decide what to organize as well. And I think we all kind of know that people who are better prepared for disasters and emergencies manage better during the disaster and emergency, and they also recover more quickly. So that's one of our main goals. So thank you again for joining us. Erin's going to put a link to a survey in the chat, and we would love for you to fill that out so we can do better next time and improve. And we'll also send an email to everybody who registered for the session today with wonderful resources that Heather is going to provide for us. And if you haven't already done so, please check out Core Alberta. It's free, and you can stay in the loop on everything that's going on. So thank you again so much to Heather and to Erin and to Kim, who just had to step away, but very much appreciate your time, Heather. And we were very happy to be guinea pigs for your presentation, and we will do that again anytime you like. Thanks very much, everybody.